I broke my body cleaning for years so my son could become an elite lawyer. But when I needed help, he tossed me a $20 bill and called me trash. He forgot that the one thing he valued, his pristine reputation, was built entirely on my sacrifice. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. My own son called me trash after I'd cleaned toilets for years to fund his fancy law degree. The eviction notice landed on my worn kitchen linoleum with a soft slap, but it felt like a gunshot. Another $50 a month, the paper screamed, and my stomach twisted tighter than the knot in my aching back. The pain had woken me, leaving me gasping for air on the cold floor in the pre-dawn dark. I dragged myself up, my knuckles swollen like old tree roots, telling the story of 6 decades poured out for one singular shining purpose. My son, Robert. Robert Vance, Esquire, was a lawyer now, a man of importance. He commanded respect in a gleaming world far removed from the stench of bleach that clung to me. My husband, Daniel, had been a dreamer, leaving me with a mountain of grief and precious little else when Robert was just 5. I looked at my small, bright-eyed boy and vowed he would soar, so I scrubbed. I scrubbed toilets in cavernous office buildings until the floors gleamed like dark mirrors. I took extra shifts at the bus station, the odor of diesel sticking to my clothes, so Robert could have the best textbooks and after-school tutoring. Every A on his report card, every accolade, felt like a personal victory against the bone-deep exhaustion. The day he got into metropolitan law, I wept for an hour. This was it. My life's work was justified. The tuition fees were astronomical, but I didn't flinch. I sold Daniel's few pieces of decent jewelry. I ate less, slept less, shrinking my own needs to almost nothing, funneling every spare penny into Robert's success. When he needed a suit for moot court, I found the money. When he needed to network with influential professors, I worked an extra weekend shift. In those early years, his voice was full of excitement. "Couldn't do it without you, Mom," he'd say quickly, and the small acknowledgement was like fuel to my weary engine. Then he graduated, magna cum laude. I was there, hidden in the back row, feeling out of place in my best and only church dress. When my persistent rattling cough acted up, Robert, on stage, glanced briefly in my direction with a flicker of what looked like shame. My heart sank. He landed a position at Sterling and Finch, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. He'd often speak of the senior partner, Arthur Rohr. "He's brilliant, Mom, but so arrogant," Robert would say, adding, "thinks he knows everything." Now, at 28, Robert Vance was launched, and I thought my work was finally done. I could ease up, maybe even ask for a bit of help. My landlord was raising the rent again, and the lid weight of the eviction notice was pressing on my chest. It took a week to gather the courage to call him. A week of sleepless nights, replaying that dismissive glance at my dress. Finally, I dialed his direct line, a number he'd given me with a certain proud flourish. "Robert Vance's office," a crisp, professional voice answered. "It's his mother, Eleanor Vance," I said, my own voice small and reedy. There was a subtle shift in the secretary, Miss Jenkins's tone. "One moment, please." I waited, the receiver growing slick in my sweating palm. Then his voice, cool, impatient, barely recognizable. "Mom, is everything all right? I'm in the middle of a very important brief." "Robert, dear," I began, my heart thumping. "I wouldn't bother you if it wasn't important. It's just my landlord. He's raised the rent again, and my back. It's been giving me terrible trouble." I hated making this risky ask, laying my need bare. "I was wondering, now that you're doing so well, if perhaps you could lend me a little something. just until I can find some lighter work. I also mentioned a confusing notice about his late father Daniel's tiny, almost forgotten veterans benefit. Something a lawyer might understand, I finished, feeling shame wash over me. A longer pause this time. I heard the faint click of a keyboard. Mom, he said, his voice colder. We've talked about this. I'm just starting out. My expenses are astronomical. I have an image to maintain, appearances to keep up. I can't just be handing out cash. It's not handing out cash, Robert. A tremor of hurt ran through my voice. It's your mother asking for a little help after all these years. He sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated exasperation. Look, I really don't have time for this right now. Can you meet me for coffee? Downstairs lobby. 15 minutes. That's all I can spare. He hung up before I could reply. I walked into that gleaming monolith of steel and glass, feeling small and out of place in my best coat. The lobby was vast, echoing, filled with sharp-suited men and women who moved with effortless importance. Robert was waiting, tapping his expensive shoe impatiently, his gaze flicking over me with a look of annoyance and embarrassment. He didn't offer a seat or coffee. Okay, Mom, he said, voice low. Urgent. What is it? Make it quick. I have a meeting with Mr. Roar in half an hour. Robert, like I said, the rent in my back. I tried to steady my nerves. I was hoping you could help out just a little. And there was this letter about your father's old benefits. He cut me off with a sharp, dismissive wave. Help you? He sneered, dripping with contempt. His eyes traveled from my worn shoes to my mended coat, lingering on my hands, the hands that had scrubbed toilets for him. You still smell like bleach and toilet cleaner, he whispered, venomous. Do you have any idea the kind of people I associate with now? You're an embarrassment, Mother. Now trash from a life I've worked hard to escape. That's what you are. Trash. The pain stole my breath. It struck me like a physical blow. He saw my tears and his cruelty only fueled him. Don't lay that martyrdom trip on me, he scoffed. You did what you had to do. That doesn't mean I owe you a damn thing for those filthy jobs you worked. I got this degree through my hard work, my intellect, not yours. He pulled out a crisp $20 bill and thrust it at me. Here, he said, lip curled in a sneer. Go buy yourself some decent soap and don't bother me again with your petty problems. I have a real life now. He turned and strode toward the elevators. I stood there, the $20 bill crumpled in my trembling hand, the word trash ringing in my ears. The boy whose future I had built with my own raw hands was now a man of a different world, and he had just discarded me. That night, the pain hardened into a cold, steely fury. He was about to learn the true cost of a mother's scorn. The very next morning, I knew exactly who I had to call. I still smelled faintly of bleach when I walked back into the gleaming lobby of Sterling and Finch. It was Friday morning, 3 days after Robert had called me trash. This time, I wasn't going to the sleek coffee bar. I was going to the top floor. My worn handbag, containing my meager evidence, faded receipts, old bank slips, Robert's childishly scrolled birthday cards, felt pitifully inadequate against the backdrop of marble and hushed efficiency. The receptionist, Ms. Jenkins, looked up as I approached her imposing mahogany desk. Her smile was professional, polite, but with an underlying note of gatekeeping. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'd like to see Mr. Arthur Roar," I said, making a risk I ask with a voice steadier than I felt. "I don't have an appointment, but it's a rather urgent personal matter." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose a fraction. "Mr. Roar is an extremely busy man, madam. He generally doesn't see anyone without a prior arrangement. Is this regarding an existing case?" "No," I replied, clutching my handbag tighter. It's it's about one of his associates, Mr. Robert Vance. At the mention of Robert's name, a flicker of curiosity crossed her face before the professional mask slipped back into place. I see. And your name? Eleanor Vance. I'm his mother. That definitely got a reaction. Her eyes did a quick, subtle scan of my appearance, from my sensible shoes to my slightly frayed coat collar. I knew what she was thinking. This is Robert Vance's mother? Please take a seat, Mrs. Vance, she said, her voice a shade cooler now. I'll see if Mr. Roar is available to speak with you briefly. I sat on the edge of a plush leather sofa, feeling like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into an eagle's eyrie. The silence of the 40th floor was broken only by the muted clicks of keyboards. Every impeccably dressed person who walked by made me feel smaller, more out of place. This was madness. Robert was right. I was an embarrassment. Just as I was about to lose my nerve, Ms. Jenkins beckoned. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Roar will see you for a few minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the point of no return. Arthur Roar's office was vast, with a panoramic view of the city that made my small apartment feel like a shoebox. He was tall, imposing, in his late 30s, his suit impeccably tailored. He didn't smile, but his eyes, sharp and intelligent, held a neutral, assessing gaze. Mrs. Vance, he said, gesturing to a chair, my secretary tells me you wish to speak with me regarding my associate, Robert Vance. Please sit. He waited, his gaze steady. Mr. Roar, I began, my voice trembling slightly. I am Robert Vance's mother, and I am here because my son has treated me in a way that I can no longer endure in silence. I took the plunge, revealing my deepest fear. He told me you were a man who understood angles, a man who wasn't afraid of a fight. A flicker of intrigue crossed his face. Robert said that, did he? Interesting. He leaned back. Please, Mrs. Vance, tell me your story. And so I did. I told him everything. The decades spent scrubbing toilets and cleaning offices, the back-breaking labor, the endless sacrifices to fund Robert's education, his law school, his bar exam, even the deposit on his fancy new apartment. I pulled out my worn ledger, my faded receipts, the bank slips showing years of transfers marked for your future, son. I showed him the childish birthday cards. When I'm a rich lawyer, Mommy, I'll buy you a big house. Then, my voice cracking, I recounted the scene in the lobby of this very building. Robert's cruel words, you smell like bleach and toilet cleaner. You're an embarrassment. Mother trash. The $20 bill thrust at me like an insult. Roar remained silent, his gaze fixed, his expression unreadable. He just listened, focused entirely on me. When I finished, my eyes stinging, Roar picked up one of the old bank slips, then a birthday card. Mrs. Vance, he said finally, his voice surprisingly gentle, your sacrifices for your son are extraordinary, and his response, if what you say is accurate, is not just ungrateful, it is reprehensible. It is accurate, Mr. Roar, I confirmed quietly. He nodded slowly. Robert Vance is a talented young lawyer, ambitious, driven. Perhaps, he added with a slight twist to his lips, a little too convinced of his own brilliance already. He sees me as a rival, you say? He walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline, then turned back. From a strictly legal standpoint, recouping funds given over many years without a formal loan agreement can be challenging. My heart sank. However, he continued, and my head snapped up, the circumstances you describe, your son's current professional standing, achieved directly through your documented extreme financial sacrifice, followed by his complete and cruel repudiation of you when you are in genuine need, and his demeaning, slanderous remarks about you. That presents a rather unique, and shall we say, compelling narrative. His eyes held a distinct glint now, the look of a courtroom gladiator. What Robert did to you, Mrs. Vance, particularly his public remarks, could potentially constitute defamation designed to harm your reputation. He leaned forward. I find Robert Vance's arrogance and lack of character problematic, and I confess the opportunity to teach a young upstart a lesson in humility, especially one who works for this firm and clearly needs it, is not without its professional appeal. I will take your case, Mrs. Vance, pro bono for now. He didn't offer a hug or a handshake, just a firm course of action. We will draft a letter to Robert outlining your grievances and demanding immediate, substantial, and ongoing financial support, as well as a formal public apology for his remarks. We will make it very clear that his current professional standing is built upon your filthy jobs, and if a satisfactory arrangement is not met swiftly, we are prepared to explore all legal avenues, including a civil suit for restitution and damages, which I assure you would be exceptionally embarrassing for a young lawyer at Sterling and Finch. Overwhelming gratitude washed over me. Mr. Roar, I whispered, choked with emotion, I don't know what to say. Say nothing yet, Mrs. Vance, he said, a rare, almost predatory smile touching his lips. Let's see what Robert has to say first when he receives my letter. I suspect his important brief might suddenly seem rather less pressing. I walked out of that gleaming tower, my steps lighter than they had been in years. The $20 bill was still crumpled in my pocket, but now it felt less like a symbol of my humiliation and more like the first tiny down payment on the justice that was finally about to be served. 10 days of anxious anticipation passed. I kept scrubbing, my body moving on autopilot, my mind clinging to Arthur Roar's confident assertion that Robert's important brief would soon feel less pressing. The $20 bill lay on my small kitchen table, untouched, a constant bitter reminder. On a Thursday, Arthur Roar called. Mrs. Vance? His deep baritone was calm. I wanted to inform you that my letter was delivered to Mr. Robert Vance at the office yesterday afternoon by registered mail. Signature required. He signed for it himself. And? My breath hitched. Has he responded? A dry chuckle came down the line. Not directly to me, no. But my sources within the firm, and one does cultivate sources, Mrs. Vance, indicate that Mr. Vance had a rather animated reaction. I heard the sound of victory in his controlled voice. Apparently, his usual composure deserted him quite spectacularly. There was shouting. A rather expensive paperweight may have met an untimely end against his office wall, and he abruptly canceled all his afternoon appointments, including a rather crucial preliminary hearing he was scheduled to attend. A small grim smile touched my lips. The first volley had landed. Animated, I repeated. Indeed, Mr. Roar confirmed. He then, I am told, spent a considerable amount of time on the phone with his own legal counsel, a rather aggressive litigator from a rival firm. It seems your son is preparing for a fight, Mrs. Vance, rather than a sensible discussion or an apology. I expected as much, I said, a weary sigh escaping me. Robert does not back down easily when his pride is wounded. Precisely, Mr. Roar said, which is why we will not be waiting for his satisfactory arrangement. As per our discussion, my team has prepared the initial filings for a civil suit. He didn't pause for my fear, just stated the consequence. We will be seeking restitution for the financial support you provided for his education and establishment, citing unjust enrichment and moral obligation. And we will also include a claim for damages due to defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress based on his public remarks and subsequent treatment of you. He paused, forcing a decision. We can file as early as Monday. Are you still resolved to proceed, Mrs. Vance? I thought of the years of scrubbing, the smell of bleach that never quite left my hands, and the single ugly word he had flung at me: trash. "Yes, Mr. Roar," I said, my voice firm. "Proceed." The lawsuit was officially served to Robert at his office the following week, this time by a very stern-looking professional process server from Arthur Roar's firm, an act designed for maximum impact within the hallowed halls of Sterling and Finch. This time, it caused an even greater explosion. The phone rang immediately, not his office line, but his personal cell phone. His voice was no longer cool and condescending, but a raw, furious roar. "What in God's name do you think you're doing, Mother?" He screamed into the phone so loud I had to hold the receiver away from my ear. "A lawsuit? You're suing your own son? Have you completely lost your mind?" "No, Robert," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding. "I believe I have finally found it. After you so kindly pointed out how stupid and uneducated I was, I decided to seek some very educated advice." "Roar put you up to this?" he accused, his voice laced with venom. "That snake! He's just using you to get at me. You're his pawn, you foolish old woman." "Mr. Roar has been nothing but a gentleman, Robert," I replied, my voice even. "He listened to my story, the one you didn't want to hear. He saw the receipts for your tuition, your rent, the clothes on your back, all paid for by my filthy jobs." I drove the final spike home. He understood that a son who calls his mother trash after she sacrificed everything for him might indeed owe her something more than a $20 insult. "Sacrifice?" he shrieked. "You call that sacrifice? You are my mother. It was your duty. You think you can just demand it all back now with interest and damages? You'll be laughed out of court. I'll countersue you for harassment, for defamation, for being a terrible grasping mother." His threats, once so terrifying, now sounded hollow and desperate. "You do what you feel you must, Robert," I said quietly, "and I will do the same. Mr. Roar will be handling all further communication." I hung up the phone, my hand trembling, but a strange sense of empowerment coursing through me. The battle lines were drawn. The news of the lawsuit, esteemed young lawyer sued by his own mother who cleaned toilets, became a hushed scandal within Sterling and Finch, then inevitably seeped into the wider legal community. Robert, who had prided himself on his pristine image, suddenly found himself the subject of whispered gossip. His colleagues, the ones he had been so desperate to impress by demeaning me, now looked at him with critical speculation. Arthur Roar, in his Machiavellian subtlety, ensured that the crucial details were known. Robert's important briefs were, I imagined, being overshadowed by the far more compelling brief detailing his own filial ingratitude. Robert, through his aggressive litigator, initially tried to have the case dismissed, claiming it was frivolous and an act of maternal spite. Arthur Roar presented my carefully documented financial contributions, my witness statements about Robert's verbal abuse and neglect, and even hinted at the existence of other potential witnesses to Robert's demeaning behavior. We had a strong case, but Robert was fighting dirty. Robert's lawyer escalated the social stakes, demanding access to my meager bank accounts and my employment records from decades of cleaning jobs. They were looking for anything they could twist to suggest I was financially irresponsible, hoping to paint me as a terrible, grasping mother and derail my claims of sacrifice. Arthur Roar was a shield, deflecting their more outrageous demands, his own team meticulously building our case with my faded receipts and the small, heartfelt notes from Robert during his college years. During a pause in the paper war, I had a tense conversation with Mr. Roar. "They are going to try to paint you as a bitter, opportunistic woman, Eleanor," Mr. Roar warned, leaning across his vast desk. "They will say the money was a gift of love, not an investment. They are now claiming your sacrifices are exaggerated, that you are secretly doing quite well, or even squandering money on yourself. My face burned. Squandering? On what? On my worn handbag and this coat? It doesn't matter, Eleanor. It's the narrative. He pressed, his gaze sharp. We need to widen the field of fire. Do you still have that $20 bill? I nodded, the money still sitting crumpled on my kitchen table. Good. We are going to use it. He explained a calculated move. I am sending a formal public offer of settlement today, a fraction of what we will demand at trial. We are including in the filing a copy of the $20 bill and a sworn statement that Robert Vance gave this amount to his mother for decent soap immediately before referring to her as trash. The genius of it hit me. This was less about legal leverage and more about character assassination, done legally. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt since the confrontation. He thought that money was the end of it. It's about image, Eleanor. He cares more about his professional reputation than any legal precedent, Roar said. When we file this, it won't just hit the judge. It will hit the firm's partners' desks. A partner like Mr. Sterling, who believes in old money discretion, will not look kindly on one of his young associates being publicly associated with such vile contempt toward his mother. The pressure on Robert at Sterling and Finch was clearly mounting. Roar, with the precision of a surgeon, was ensuring that key partners were discreetly made aware of the full, unvarnished details of Robert's conduct. Robert's star, once ascending so rapidly, was now visibly tarnished. The consequence came quickly. Robert was suddenly removed from a high-profile mergers team. He was still employed, but Roar confirmed he had been marginalized. He's been benched, Eleanor, Roar told me simply. He's no longer on the fast track to junior partner. He's a liability, a walking embarrassment. Robert Vance was being forced to confront the reality of his actions, not in the privacy of my small apartment, but in the cold, impartial light of the law, with his own professional rival orchestrating his defense. My payback wasn't just about money. It was about accountability, about him finally understanding that the trash mother he had so cruelly cast aside had a powerful ally. But Robert's lawyer was aggressive. He countered our offer with a motion claiming I was harassing Robert. I had won the battle of the benching, but the war was far from over. They won't let this go to trial, will they? I asked Roar, my voice betraying a sliver of doubt. Roar looked at me, the gladiator's glint in his eyes. They can't afford to, Eleanor. We are prepared to go to trial and have you, Hazel Bishop, the toilet-scrubbing mother, testify in open court. The optics for Robert and for his prestigious firm would be devastating. But they don't know that for sure, I insisted. They do now, Roar smiled grimly. They had one card left to play, mediation, and the date is set. The turning point was court-mandated mediation, scheduled for a Monday morning. I knew the weight of this day. This was the moment I would finally look Robert in the eye and watch him face the consequences of his cruelty, or I would be forced to retreat. Arthur Roar met me outside the conference room. Remember, Eleanor, he instructed, you are not here to win back your son's love. You are here to secure your future and demand respect. He insulted your dignity. We demand compensation for it. We walked into the conference room and took our seats across a long, polished mahogany table. Robert was already there, flanked by his lawyer. He looked terrible. His expensive suit hung on him, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed, and the arrogant sneer he'd worn in the lobby was replaced by a sullen, resentful glower. He refused to meet my gaze, staring instead at the tabletop. Robert's lawyer opened with a barrage of legal bluster, calling our suit extortionate and an abuse of process. Arthur Roar, however, was devastatingly precise. He laid out the clear trail of my financial contributions, the bank slips, the receipts, directly funding Robert's entire education and early adult life. He presented the evidence of unjust enrichment, stating, Mrs. Vance spent 3 decades on menial labor, so her son could achieve a salary where 1 month of his income equals 6 months of hers. This success was built on her broken back and raw hands. Then, Roar pivoted to the emotional claim. He presented my journal entries detailing Robert's insults, the $20 bill incident, and the emotional distress it had caused. He hinted strongly at witness testimony from people who had seen Robert's dismissive behavior toward me in the firm's lobby. Robert's lawyer blustered and postured, but the weight of the evidence and the dawning realization of the catastrophic damage this was doing to Robert's career was undeniable. Arthur Roar made the final threat, a single, clear line. We are prepared to go to trial, to have Mrs. Vance, the woman you see here, the toilet scrubbing mother, testify in open court that her lawyer's son called her trash after she financed his entire life. The discovery process has already exposed his moral turpitude to this firm. A public trial will expose it to the city. My client demands full restitution and a written public retraction. The silence in the room was immense, broken only by the sharp, panicked inhale of Robert's lawyer. Robert himself remained silent, but I watched his knuckles whiten on the edge of the mahogany table. He had taken my love and spat it back in my face. Now I was forcing him to acknowledge the debt with his most prized possession, his reputation. After hours of tense negotiation, with Robert mostly silent and his lawyer doing all the talking, Arthur Roar looked at me. They are folding, Eleanor. We have them. A settlement was reached. It wasn't the millions some might fantasize about. My claim was for restitution and acknowledgement, a measure of security. Robert was forced to agree to a structured repayment plan, a significant monthly sum that would be automatically deducted from his salary for the next 10 years. Arthur Roar calculated it as a fair approximation of the direct financial investment I had made in Robert's law degree and living expenses during that time, with a modest consideration for the emotional distress. He also had to issue a formal written apology, vetted by both lawyers, acknowledging my sacrifices and retracting his cruel words. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would allow me to live with dignity, to afford my rent without constant fear, to finally see a doctor about my aching back. The news of the settlement and its terms quickly made the rounds at Sterling and Finch. Robert Vance, the arrogant young star, was now Robert Vance, the son who had to pay his mother back for calling her trash after she'd scrubbed toilets for him. As I stood to leave, gathering my handbag, Robert finally lifted his head and looked at me. There was no apology, no remorse, only a bitter, burning hatred. I knew I had lost my son perhaps forever, but for the first time in years, I did not drop my gaze. I walked out with Arthur Roar, leaving Robert and his lawyer to manage the debris of his arrogance. The payment was secured, the apology drafted, but the price of my victory still hung in the air. He had paid his financial debt, but he had lost everything else. The money would arrive, a silent, impersonal transaction, but I had a chilling certainty about the future. I knew he was not done with me. The denial of Robert's motion to dismiss the lawsuit had been a small victory, but Arthur Roar had warned me it was just the first skirmish in what could be a protracted war. Robert, backed by his aggressive litigator, seemed determined to fight me every step of the way to protect his carefully constructed image and, more importantly, his wallet. The irony of him accusing me of being a terrible grasping mother after he'd called me trash for asking for a small loan was a bitter pill I swallowed daily. His lawyer demanded invasive discovery access to my meager bank accounts and employment records from decades of cleaning jobs, hoping to twist my sacrifice into financial irresponsibility. Arthur Rohr was my shield, meticulously building our case with the evidence I had so painstakingly gathered: the faded receipts, the bank slips, the small notes from Robert thanking me for my endless support. Each piece of paper was a testament to my life's work, a life poured into him. The pressure on Robert at Sterling and Finch was mounting. Arthur Rohr, with the subtlety of a viper, ensured that key partners were discreetly made aware of the full, unvarnished details of Robert's conduct toward me, not just the lawsuit, but the verbal abuse and the profound ingratitude. A firm built on integrity and old money discretion did not look kindly upon one of its ambitious young associates being publicly embroiled in a scandal involving the financial exploitation of his working-class mother. Robert's star, once ascending so rapidly, was now visibly tarnished. The confrontation came during the court-mandated mediation session. We sat across the long, polished mahogany table. Robert, his lawyer, Arthur Rohr, and me. Robert looked terrible. His expensive suit hung on him, his eyes bloodshot and shadowed, and the arrogant sneer was replaced by a sullen, resentful glower. He refused to meet my gaze. Arthur Rohr laid out our case with devastating precision. He detailed the clear trail of my financial contributions, directly funding Robert's entire education and early adult life. He contrasted my decades of menial labor with Robert's current earning potential, a potential I had made possible, and his subsequent cruel repudiation and refusal of minimal support. Rohr presented my journal entries detailing Robert's insults, the $20 bill incident, and the emotional distress it had caused. He even hinted at potential witness testimony from people who had seen Robert's dismissive behavior. Robert's lawyer blustered and postured, but the weight of the evidence and the dawning realization of the catastrophic damage this was doing to Robert's career was undeniable. Then Arthur Rohr made the final, unforgiving threat. He made it clear: we are prepared to go to trial. We will have Mrs. Vance, Eleanor Vance, the toilet scrubbing mother, testify in open court about how her lawyer's son called her trash after she'd financed his entire life. He paused, letting the implication land. The optics for Mr. Vance, and for this prestigious firm, would be devastating. Robert finally looked at me, across the table, his eyes empty. The pain in his gaze wasn't remorse. It was the pure terror of a man watching his life's work crumble because of a $20 insult. I finally understood that what he resented was not the work, but that I existed to remind him of the price of his success. After hours of tense negotiation, with Robert remaining mostly silent and his lawyer doing all the talking, Arthur Rohr nodded once. A settlement had been reached. It was not the millions some might fantasize about. My claim was for restitution, for acknowledgement, for a measure of security for the years I had left. Robert was forced to agree to a structured repayment plan. The monthly sum would be automatically deducted from his salary for the next 10 years. It was a fair approximation of the direct financial investment I had made in his law degree and living expenses, with a modest consideration for the emotional distress. It wouldn't make me rich, but it would allow me to live with dignity and afford my rent without constant fear. He also had to issue a formal written apology, vetted by both lawyers, acknowledging my sacrifices and retracting his cruel words. I knew any apology from him now would be hollow, a legal necessity, rather than a heartfelt sentiment. The payment was secured. The fight was over. I had forced accountability, but the victory tasted like ashes. The news of the settlement and its terms quickly made the rounds at Sterling and Finch. Robert Vance, the arrogant young star, was now forever labeled Robert Vance, the son who had to pay his mother back for calling her trash after she'd scrubbed toilets for him. Arthur Rohr met with me in his office one final time, a week after the settlement was signed. The documents lay stacked on his vast, uncluttered desk. "Your son's career," Rohr told me with grim satisfaction, "is effectively stalled. He is no longer on the fast track to junior partner. He is a liability, a walking embarrassment to the firm's carefully cultivated image." He paused. "Whether he will ever recover professionally is doubtful." This was the professional payback, the double price he had to pay. His financial debt was secured for the next 10 years, but his professional ambition, the one thing he truly valued, was extinguished. "Thank you, Mr. Rohr," I said, my voice quiet. "You saw the angle I couldn't." Rohr merely nodded. "I saw a profound injustice, Eleanor. And I saw an opportunity to teach a difficult lesson." He gathered the papers. "The first payment will hit your account on the 1st of next month. It is a silent, impersonal transaction. This legal matter is closed." For me, the payback was more than just the money, though that was a profound relief. It was the acknowledgement, however forced, of my worth, of my sacrifice. It was the knowledge that he could no longer dismiss me, no longer treat me as invisible refuse from his past. I had stood up to him, not with screams or threats, but with the quiet power of truth and the unexpected alliance with a man he had underestimated as much as he had underestimated me. I finally had the means to address the small, forgotten pieces of my old life. The confusing notice I had received months ago about Daniel's tiny veteran's benefit was still on my counter. Robert, the high-powered lawyer, had ignored it. Now, with a fraction of the settlement funds, I hired a small local paralegal who quickly processed the claim. A small lump sum arrived weeks later, a final small acknowledgement of my husband's life and the security Robert had denied me. The biggest change came from my body. The settlement allowed me to cut back on my cleaning shifts, to finally give my aching back some rest. I booked an appointment with a specialist for the chronic pain and the persistent, rattling cough that had settled in my chest over the harsh winters. My own needs, which I had shrunk to nothing for Robert, could finally be addressed. The settlement had bought me my health and my dignity. Yet a deep, abiding sorrow remained. The boy I had loved was gone, replaced by a bitter, resentful man who now saw me only as the architect of his professional humiliation. The wound would likely never fully heal. But I took the first payment, a number that looked like a king's ransom next to my old paycheck, and I immediately started a small savings account. Something just for me, for a rainy day, or perhaps for a small, quiet pleasure I hadn't allowed myself in decades. I rarely heard from Robert directly after that. The monthly payments arrived in my bank account, a silent, impersonal transaction. I had won the battle, but I had paid the cost of the entire war. The legal justice was served, but the maternal heart remained broken. I started a new routine. I still took on a few cleaning jobs. I needed the rhythm of the work, the feel of clean competence beneath my hands. But I cut my hours significantly. I could finally see the doctor about my back and my persistent cough without worrying about the bills. The medical appointments led to physical therapy, and the physical relief was profound. The constant screaming protest of my body finally began to quiet. I opened a small savings account, something just for me, a tangible counterpoint to the years I spent pouring every earned penny into Robert's account. The $20 bill Robert had flung at me still sat on my kitchen table for weeks. It was a brand, a symbol of public humiliation and private agony. But one morning, after a productive session of physical therapy that left me feeling stronger than I had in years, I picked it up. It felt different now. It no longer felt like his contempt. I took the $20 bill to a local frame shop, a tiny act of defiant empowerment. I framed it. It hung in my small kitchen, a daily reminder not of his contempt, but of my own strength, of the moment I decided I was worth more. It was a flag, not a wound. One late afternoon, my old rotary phone rang. It was an unlisted number. I answered, and the cold, familiar voice hit me. Mother. It was Robert. He didn't use my name. His voice was flat, seething with resentment. Robert, I replied, my voice steady. Your payment arrived today, he spat. Just wanted to let you know the transaction went through. Another nail in my professional coffin. Are you happy now? Did you get the attention you wanted? It was the final, desperate confrontation I had braced for. He still could not see the truth. He only saw my demand as spite. I'm living with dignity, Robert, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Something you tried to take from me in that lobby. The payment is the cost of your arrogance, not the price of my love. You lost your son for this, he sneered. For a check. You chose money over family. I lost my son the moment you looked at my coat and called me trash, I countered, using his own venomous word against him. I chose my self-respect. You taught me that my sacrifices, my filthy jobs, meant nothing to you. So I spoke to you in the only language you understand, consequences. I heard him inhale sharply on the other end, his breath turning into a shaky, frustrated sigh. He couldn't attack me anymore, not with Arthur Roar's documents in his file. He had nothing left but his bitterness. Don't call this line again, Robert, I instructed. All further communication is financial. Enjoy the future I paid for. I placed the receiver back in the cradle. I stood for a moment, my hand trembling faintly, not from fear, but from the immense exertion of cutting the final toxic cord. The emotional wound was deep, but it was finally clean. I had lost the boy I raised, but I had regained the woman I was. I looked at the framed $20 bill hanging on the wall. It was a tangible daily reminder of the moment I decided I was worth more than his contempt. I continued my cleaning jobs, though not as many. The settlement allowed me to work only the shifts that suited my body, to finally give my raw hands and aching back the rest they deserved. The scent of bleach was finally less a part of my own skin and more just a tool of my trade. The monthly payments from Robert arrived in my bank account with the cold, silent efficiency of the law. A direct deposit, always on the first, always impersonal. It was a decade-long transaction, binding him to the consequences of his contempt. I used the savings I built to make a down payment on my small apartment. It was not the big house Robert had childishly promised, but it was mine. The small act of ownership felt like a profound security I hadn't known since Daniel died. No landlord could ever threaten me with another $50 a month rent increase again. Arthur Roar and I exchanged final holiday cards, professional, courteous. He had achieved his aim. He had embarrassed his rival and secured justice for a wronged client. I had achieved mine, financial restitution and dignity. The final closure came not in a courtroom, but in my own small kitchen. One rainy afternoon, I was cleaning my apartment, polishing the countertops until they gleamed. I looked at the reflection, no longer a tired, hunched figure I barely recognized. I saw Eleanor Vance, a woman who had fought a lawyer with nothing but truth and records, and won. I had scrubbed floors so he could walk in polished halls. He had called me trash, but in the end, it was his life that was now littered with the debris of his own arrogance and ingratitude. His career was stalled, his pride shattered, and he was financially tethered to the mother he despised for the next 10 years. That was the final, bitter price of his ambition. The $20 bill on my wall was a constant presence. It no longer represented the sting of his cruelty, but the moment I chose to fight. It was a victory flag for the woman who smelled of bleach and honest labor. The boy I loved was gone, but the mother who had sacrificed everything stood tall. I had found my payback not in riches, but in peace, in self-respect, and in the unshakable knowledge that I had, against all odds, reclaimed my worth. And I, Eleanor Vance, could finally breathe. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.